Liz Estrada.
Yes, thank you. You must know the play.
I know the play.
Amazing.
You were a actor on the Chips series, right?
Oh, that's funny because the people would say that. They would
It
think
was with
Estrada.
Chris Estrada or something like that on that show.
Estrada.
Yeah,
Recording, yes, yes, it's definitely recording.
Okay, beautiful.
We're not doing this.
you may have to edit this part.
Oh,
Hi Sam, how you doing? Hi Michael.
How are you?
Okay,
All
good
right,
to see you guys.
today.
Harrison Klein.
Harrison Klein.
So,
Harrison Klein.
Harrison Klein.
okay, so
Sweetly inspirational.
Little
Sweetly
stone.
inspirational.
We got to preface
Sweetly
this, like, we also
inspirational?
love weed.
Yes, that's my moniker or tag.
I like that. Sweetly inspirational. The Harrison Klein.
Let's start us off. I think let's be very honest here. We had an initial episode that did not really come to fruition, but as we all say, everything really happens for a reason. So maybe that episode was a good stepping stone and building block to what we need to discuss today.
yes, we had.
Second chances are always, sometimes better than first.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Oh,
Everybody.
It's good to see you guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on again and for your time.
Yes.
It is my great pleasure. You guys were great interviewers. I enjoyed the experience, and I'm going to enjoy it again.
And let's do it for everybody else in the world to enjoy. We've definitely made sure we're recording this podcast. So, for our viewers out there, we last week we attempted to record our podcast, and we found out at the end of the meet at our beautiful discussion we had with Harrison here, we didn't press record.
That's right.
Obviously, thank you guys for visiting this week at our beautiful little podcast.
Good name.
A beautiful little podcast.
Yeah, I think
Sweetly inspirational.
Sweetly
sweetly
inspirational.
inspirational podcast.
Yeah.
So I think we should start out reiterating just a little bit of our last conversation so the audience can understand who you are, Harrison.
Yes.
And let's go back to, your 28 years of age and the spiritual awakening. And, if it's so boring, because you've already said this, once before last week, if you want to, sum it up in a shorter way, feel free. But I think it would be a nice way to bring the audience back in,
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think we should, before we even get to that, let's start with, because who you are, what you do.
Oh yeah, and also in relation to you, how
Yeah.
you know each other.
And what brings you to the podcast. So let's start. Yeah. So because our viewers didn't get to hear our previous wonderful introduction of yourself, why don't you regale us again with who is Harrison Klein?
In this day and age, there's so much out there with information coming at us, and we're in a state of constant flux, with the economy being what it is, with the divisions being what they are, with all other kinds of conflicts that we have to deal with and drama we have to deal with on a daily basis. I'm sort of a center anchor for a lot of different people to want to grow their spiritual and their prosperity consciousness. So Harrison Klein is somebody on a mission that wants to improve other people's lives in a tremendous and significant way, and as quickly as possible. That's who Harrison Klein is. So, and basically it's, where I define, I align, and I receive all my information and love and create unconditional love for other people and show them the tactics and the pathways to do that. So, and to receive what they want in terms of wealth and abundance and joy and relationships and health.
Fantastic. All right, we can wrap that up here. Thank you.
All right, I'll see you guys next week.
That was awesome. So when did this journey start for you? When did you know that you were going to be that iteration of Harrison Klein?
Wow. Well, I can give you a little bit of history, which, I don't want to go deeply into, but I do want to say that when I was 4 years old, I had an experience that changed my life. And it was a negative experience. My father and mother were arguing about money in the kitchen. And my father, who was a very low key person with kind of a depressed demeanor about him all the time. My mother was emasculating him, and for the first and only time in my entire life that I ever saw him lose it, he just exploded. And he grabbed my mother by the neck and he put her up against the wall. And, I thought he was going to kill her. And I was born to Holocaust parents, and they were in survival mode continuously. And they were afraid of everything, and they were also, in a new world with no language skills, no marketing skills, no physical skills, and so they were always in this place of survival and having to survive. They didn't know what they were doing. They were displaced, and it was a very tough road. And my mother emasculated my father. She was a bully compared to my father's depression, because my father was depressed and my mother wanted more. So at that particular point, when I saw him put her up against the wall, now believe me, I had inherited all this anger, fear, and negative logistics all around me for all those years that I was alive. And then at that particular point, I said, I no longer want to live. I don't want to see this. I don't want to be part of this. And I retreated into autism. I actually went into an autistic state, which was the collapse of all my awareness. It was the collapse of my ability to see, hear, or feel in any way. And I went through 28 years of my life in that space of where um, I had very little connection with anything and a tremendous amount of fear. And the fear kept repeating cyclically over and over and over again. So I wasn't very verbal. I was very uh, dark in my ability to see. People always, the features of most people looked like they had a gray type cloud across their demeanors and their faces and stuff like that. And I never got to see anybody really clearly. My hearing was affected in such a bad way that you may have heard bad cell phones where you get to hear about every third word or something that somebody is saying, and that's how sound was coming into me. I could not hear anything clearly, and so it was like a bad cell phone. I heard about every third word, and I tried to piece together things, and I never really understood what was going on. I was 28 years old. Fast forward to 28 years old. I'm sitting in an apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, in an overstuffed chair, middle of the night, probably about 3:30 in the morning, something like that, 2:30 or 3:30 in the morning. And I'm an art student at that particular point. I'm in art school, and I have graduated college at that point, but I'm an art student, and I am drawing a picture. And that picture um, was a view. If you know anything about a classical artist by the name of Vermeer, he's somebody whose paintings were looking into something from another space, and that's what I was doing. I was making a drawing of looking into my one of the rooms in my apartment from another space. So I had a perspective. Then, without warning, all of a sudden I am yanked out of my consciousness is yanked out of my body. I get sent spinning through the universe in this tube of white light, and suddenly, all these things are happening. I'm traveling at a velocity faster than the speed of light. I'm moving through the universe, colors coming at me, patterns coming at me, is like really enormously unbelievable, and like a light show 10 times that of 2001, that movie 2001. And it's coming at me, and I'm watching planets birth and die. I'm watching galaxies spin. I am hearing choirs of angels in the background. At least that's what I interpret it as now, sort of this unearthly music that I've never heard before or since. And very pleasant, by the way, very wonderful music, very pleasant, but I've never heard anything like it before or since. And, so I am in this vortex of white light, and then for about, I have no idea, could have been in it for 1 minute, could have been in it for 12 hours, could have been in it for 3 days. I have no idea because I didn't have any reference. So when I come back in my body, I come in with a thud like that, and suddenly, all of a sudden, my autism is completely gone. My senses are highly awakened. I am able to see energy. I watch this. I'm looking around my apartment and I'm seeing the grays pulsate and the greens and the yellows pulsate differently from each other, and I'm seeing the vibrations of them. I'm experiencing energy in a visual, visceral way. I'm also then, my hearing becomes so enhanced. I'm looking out the door, and my apartment is about 30 yards from the street, basically, and I could hear people 30 yards away clearly that I couldn't hear across a table with no interruptions. I'm also in a space whereby my body becomes so sensitive that, in the autistic state, my body is one in which I had what Eckhart Tolle calls a pain body, which is whenever anybody came within my auric experience, I would experience stabbing pains in my ribs. And my body becomes so sensitive that I become aware of everything that's going on inside of my body. I could feel everything in such an enormous way. I actually experience the birth of a thought at the base of my spine, travel up my spine, through my nervous system, through all the wrappings of my nervous system, come into the back of my head, jump across my amygdala, across my corpus callosum, and which is the depression between both hemispheres of your brain, and then like a soap bubble pop in front of my eyes, like a soap bubble, into either a thought or an image or something visual. And so for the first time, I'm experiencing this ocean of silence that's magnificent because it's all energy and intelligence. And I'm watching how it works. I'm watching the energy. I'm watching the experience. I'm feeling everything. And I am experiencing life in about 1,000 times more energy than I had in the autistic state. And the best analogy I can give you on that is basically, and I've repeated this to you guys before, the best analogy I can give you is like if I was standing on the platform of the bullet train in Japan and it roared by me at 250 miles an hour and I grabbed onto a side rail and held on for dear life. That's how much energy was downloaded into me from this experience. And it's about 1,000 times more energy than I had. My IQ went up probably 50 points from that moment. It's instantaneous, just like that. My IQ went up about 50 points. I was totally alert, internally and externally. Never had any non-alertness, and I never knew anything like that before. I mean, I could see everything, I could feel everything, I could be everything, and I began to understand how the universe works and all the elements of it, and then how it is emanating from me. Illumination always comes from a source, and that source at that point was me. It was coming through me, and I felt illuminated, and I was illuminated. And what other people experienced as me was not the physical me that they had known 28 years prior to that. It was the illumination of who I had become from that experience. Does that help?
What was the word you used? What was the word you used to describe this event? It was the Japanese word. What was that again?
Yes, this is what the Japanese call a satori, Satori. And a satori translated into English means a sudden enlightenment. And there are about 0.1111199634012 people on the face of the earth that experience it. So, and when the experience happened to me, basically, I didn't know what it was, obviously, because if I had known what it was, I would have known it. But, I was thrust into the unknown, and you can't know the unknown, otherwise it's the known.
Right.
So you're in the unknown with all this incredible energy, and you're not in a physical world. You're in an energetic world. You have switched into another dimension, if you will.
Mhm.
And though you're still there, So though you're still there in the physical world, you're also in another dimension simultaneously, and you're the whole universe, and you experience that viscerally. The universe is inside you; it's not outside of you. There is no out there. There's only in here, and you experience all that you see, all that you connect with as you, coming from you in an illuminated fashion. You're getting light passing through you and forming itself as other people, as other things, like in the Matrix, like in the movie The Matrix. But it was real. I mean, it is real. Not was real. It is real. That's how I experience things. So you experience them as light, as opposed to experiencing them as flesh or stone or, plastic or whatever the case may be. So there's a difference, and you're tuned into the vibration as opposed to the flesh. Does that help?
Yes, and Harrison, I have a quick question about the time period of your Satori. Were you reading any spiritual material at the time, or was this a complete shock from the lifestyle you were living? Like, had you been reading any sacred texts or getting into chanting, or was this a complete experience outside of anything you were delving into, even in thought, the Satori event?
It was a total shock. I had never even believed in God. I didn't read anything spiritual. I didn't even know any of these kinds of things existed, and I'd never even heard of anything like this. I spent 2 years after that event researching if anybody else had had the same experience, and I couldn't find anybody. At the end of about 2 years, I found two descriptions of that. One was from a championship weightlifter who had it at the peak of where he um, he was a bench presser or whatever, and he had lifted 20 pounds more than he had done. He was already a champion. He had lifted about 20 pounds more in one lift than he had ever lifted before, and it set him into a satori. Another one was a runner who had broken his own record and sent him into a satori. Years later, about maybe 7 years ago or something like that, I had the privilege and the occasion to meet with Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth astronaut who walked on the moon. And I was at his house basically, and he told me the story, or there was the story about him coming back from the moon, traveling through space at about 125 miles, 125,000 miles or 12,000 miles or something like that an hour,
Ridiculous.
where he was looking through the porthole of the space capsule, and what he saw inside the porthole, inside the window of the space capsule, was the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon triangulated within that circle, and it sent him into a satori. And he went into this transformation. The other astronauts in the space capsule, there were three others, didn't know he was experiencing it, and he didn't tell them. When he got back to Earth, the very first thing he did was that he began to create this research institute. He had a lot of money and he had a lot of influence, and he raised about $2.5 million, and he created the Institute of Noetic Studies, and that's the primary research facility in the world on researching consciousness and how it works. So his satori was exactly or very close to the exact experience that I had. And I hadn't known anybody physically ever before that had ever experienced that. But we kind of compared notes on what was happening. So he's traveling through space at 125,000 miles an hour, or whatever the hell it is, and he's experiencing this satori, and he's going through this amazing shift with this download of gigantic amounts of energy. And he says to Houston, he says, somebody write something on a card and hold it up. And somebody wrote something on a card, and he said, just hold it up. And he was able to read the card from 200,000 miles out in space of what was going on in Houston. And he said, do it again. And they did it again. And then he said, do it again. And they did it again. He was able to read that from 200,000 miles out. His psychic abilities were so enhanced at that particular moment, or through that particular experience, that he became, a tremendous different, tremendously different person, and he was already a tremendous achiever. So, you know, he's a guy who had made millions. He's a guy who was at the top of the game in, the Air Force or whatever it was, whatever piece of the military he was in. He was a test pilot. He was a research engineer. He had done all kinds. So, have you ever seen the movie or read the book called The Da Vinci Codes?
Yes.
Yes.
So in the basement of the Da Vinci Codes, and the whole book revolves around this situation. In the basement of the Da Vinci Codes, of the Smithsonian, the Da Vinci Codes takes place in the Institute of Noetic Sciences about this circumstance. And so Edgar Mitchell created the Institute of Noetic Sciences. His facility was the most profound research on consciousness on the planet for almost all the years that it's existed. It is having another resurgence right now. It's had many resurgences, but it's having another resurgence right now. And if you want a description of what goes on in the Institute of Noetic Sciences, it's in the Da Vinci Codes, if you ever want to read that again.
So the Noetic
That's-
Science, the headquarters of the Noetic Sciences is in the.
Washington, D.C., in the basement of the Smithsonian Institute.
Is it a
Writing
place
that
that
Yes.
an average person can visit?
No. Yes, you can go into it, but you can't go into the research facilities, but you can go into it, I think. Um, but you can access it, you can communicate with them. They're doing continuous research on higher consciousness of different sorts. Psychic abilities, ESP, telekinesis, remote viewing, all those other things. And that's part of what happens when you have a Satori. You have all these additional powers. They just expand you into a different space. So you become really human as opposed to a mask of being human. So
What were some of the what were some of the things that powers you think you've experienced since your Satori?
I have psychic abilities, so I have psychic abilities. I'm not terribly at liberty to kind of, I don't want to generate inquiries about my psychic abilities because that's not where I'm at. But what I do is I'm able to see energy, and because I'm able to see energy, I can help people expand theirs. I can see where they're lacking. The aura, we are surrounded by about 8 layers of energy. Everything from, our physical self to our emotional self to our intellectual self to our angelic self to our galactic self, our experience. We're surrounded by all these layers of energy, and they have different frequencies, and they all have different colors. So one of the things about being psychic is that you can see into these layers of energy. And when you see into these layers of energy, you can see where the brown spots are or the dark spots are. The dark spots are the things that you have either lacked or created that are blocks to your ability to connect there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for the dark spots, how to seal parts of our aura that may
And
have holes, or how to clear out the dark spots?
It's all completely about elevating your emotions in particular ways. So, the principle that is understood by all sages is that the higher emotional level or elevation of energy is always greater and always dissolves the lower. So when you're wealthy, you don't think about poverty. When you're happy, you don't consider depression. So every time you elevate your emotion, you're eliminating part of the blockage. Okay, and if you elevate your emotion enough, even at one moment, you completely can unblock something. So does that help?
Thank you.
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
so for our viewers, Harrison and I work together, and he's a
Yes.
spiritual
Michael's a great student.
mentor of mine or a teacher. So for the podcast, let's
It works together.
let's have this as an exercise where, since you and I have worked together for many months now, what are some let's say, as Liz put it, or as you put it, dark spots you think that I would need to work on? And this is just a
On you personally?
just like that I'm willing to share with the world, because I think it's okay to have your weaknesses, to be comfortable in your
You want to be vulnerable? You,
don't make me regret that. Let's go.
So you asked Harrison to show your dark spots.
Yeah, or tell me what yes.
Okay, yeah.
I really don't want to go through that display because that's not what that's
Okay.
not.
Okay.
That's not the purpose of the you
Okay.
really you want that to happen. I
Well,
feel like that's not.
No,
I feel like
I
that's
mean,
a private thing
I
that
thought
you-
that would be like a good talking
No,
point.
I almost feel like
If
you're
it's
going to
okay,
regret
We're
this
gonna
the way-
we're gonna edit this part out
Harrison's
anyway,
act,
so it's
Harrison's
fine.
really
Okay.
saving her.
Ah, this is the
Cool.
perfect time.
know,
for-
Okay. This is
No,
actually
it's
perfect. Hold on. We're gonna.
Well, that could,
We're looking to.
Well, I didn't want the door to slam
Okay.
in the.
okay.
But
But I think
so where were
Samuel,
we? Where
yeah,
were we?
Okay.
Samuel had a question or a comment.
I don't really know if I did. I have a few questions written down.
Are we live with? And are we streaming?
Yes, we are.
We're live.
We're not
We're live. We're recording.
We're recording.
Recording.
You
Yeah.
could
So
stream though. Get the phone and go
Oh,
on
we could do a
Instagram
little-
and
we
you
could
can
do a little
record
streaming.
live too. If you want.
Can we? I have something if you're still waiting.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
One thing. Oh, one thing just to clarify for the viewers, not the readers. With the Satori, has there only been one Satori, or were you able to access this place again consciously, or get thrown into this
There are
realm?
many mini satoris. There's one initial one, and then there are many mini satoris that, as you go through on, you have their revelations. They're incredible revelations. So, uh, um, once you have left the identification of the physical, what happens is you are fluid in multiple dimensions. And being fluid in multiple dimensions, you have revelations continuously. You're not restricted to what the information is in the physical realm. So, Einstein said intuition is the greatest thing you can have, and all of these things are intuitive by nature, meaning they're coming from a higher source into you, being downloaded into you. So as you have higher consciousness experiences, you become more open in a continuous funnel fashion to get greater and greater information and abilities as you travel through all this
Do you,
lifetime.
I recently, the other night, had a pretty out of body experience. I was
Ooh,
laying in my
cool.
bed in my parents' house. It was nighttime, pitch black, no sound except for the rain. And
Best time to have it.
I live in Brooklyn where there's constant noise and constant stimulus. There's always a little bit of light coming into my room.
Yeah.
And I'm laying in my bed and I'm about to go to sleep. I had smoked one small joint about 2 hours prior. So I wasn't really, too intoxicated at the time. I was feeling fairly sober. And I was laying in my bed with my eyes open, and I felt like I was in a sensory deprivation tank, and I completely lost any feeling of my body. And I had this very, very sudden just thought in my head, holy crap, everything that I've read and I've really believed in is true. I'm just a seed of consciousness in this body, in this world. And I almost couldn't move my body at that point. And I was awake. It was like meditating, the deepest I've ever meditated, but my eyes were open. And because the room was so black and because there was, not much sound or light, I think it contributed to that feeling, and it was wild. So what do you have to say about that and just out of body experiences in general? And then also, you want to go and tell someone, hey, this happened, but they look at you and you're like, oh, what are you talking about? You're
Right.
probably just really
Yeah.
stumped or something.
These are things, they're normally not things you share with people who are not at the same level you are.
Right.
So one of the good things that happen, or what I'm seeing that happened with you basically, is your body fell asleep, but your mind stayed awake. And we call that lucid dreaming, where you are awake in the dream. So you become awake within the dream, and your astral self lifts out of your body, and it comes into the astral plane. Now there are two levels in the astral plane. One is the lower astral, and the other one is the higher astral. What's going on over there? You Okay. The lower astral is where all the craziness is, the disembodied people and the ghosts and all that other kinds of stuff, all the disenfranchised stuff that hasn't resolved itself to come into another carnation or anything else. The higher astral is the place, and they're creatures from all over the universe. They're not just, earthly. So the higher astral is the celestial astral. So that is, you have to have achieved a certain level of vibration to step into the higher astral. And when you achieve that particular level of vibration, you experience, the lightness of being. And either light comes through you or you experience celestial kinds of vividness, whether it be colors or the Akashic records or the planes or just different kinds of, you know, um, energetic experiences that are not just beings, but they are um, they're compilations and conglomerations and aggregations of energy that give you information. I don't know how to explain it much other than that, but
It's very hard to explain. I
yeah,
think you're
but it's it anybody who's gone out of body can kind of talk to you about the astral. They can talk to you about the astral because it's a light body that leaves the physical body. It's the inner soul body that comes in out of the space that you've created that has contained you in this physical form. And so you then come into the wholeness of everything else. In the physical form, we're about 1 or 2% of who we are in the greater beingness of our awareness. And when we leave the physical form, or when we are able to break through out of the physical form, we come into the wholeness of who we are. And so there's a great whole 98% more experience and alertness to what's going on with you than what you are, what you're experiencing in the physical. So, and then, but your astral comes, your astral body or your light body comes back into your physical body so that you can have your day to day, because you're here for a mission. We all have a mission that we have to fulfill by coming into a body. It's a good thing to be in this body because it teaches you how to expand your self-experience, your whole self. It teaches you how to push that into new realms of energy, new realms of being, alertness, sweetness, love, unconditional love, angelic experiences, fairy experiences, guides, all those other kinds of things. Intuitive experiences, yeah. And then direct conversation with source.
It's amazing.
Source won't converse with you until you've come into the intuitive.
yes.
Yeah.
We spoke last time about like the soul voice versus the ego voice. I think that's what we touched upon that at one point, right? Didn't we speak
Yeah.
about it? How like your soul voice is like this nice soft whisper of a voice.
Yes.
The ego voice is just
Oh yeah, your internal
very
voice is,
shouty.
the ego versus
Angry
your
voice.
higher self.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
you spoke on, maybe you could clarify for the or tell for the audience this time, how someone can tell the difference between their ego and their higher self.
Okay, so
Very important.
ego, the acronym of ego would say it would mean edge God out. So that's when you separate yourself from your experience of the whole. So when you separate yourself, you are not a full human being. You're not whole. I mean, you experience yourself in the physical, but you're not whole. You're fragmented about things. You have dark thoughts. You have, different experiences that you allow yourself to go through in anger, frustration, fear, disappointment, all that kind of stuff like that. The soul has no such experience. The soul has no ability it has the ability, but it doesn't want to, and it won't commune with you on an ego level. So the soul, the ego, whenever you're listening to that little voice inside of your head. The difference between the ego and the soul voice is that the ego voice can be loud and it can be directive. The soul voice is always soft, whispering, and states everything, every communication with you in a positive fashion. So if it wants to issue a warning, so if the soul wants to issue a warning to save you from someone who wants to do you harm, it always just says, don't go. It tells you to, experience a different route. Instead of going there, it understands that there's somebody at the place where you're going to that may want to do you harm. And so it says experience a different route. It says move over here. The ego is go get them. You gotta deal with this shit. That um, is arrogance. It edges God out. It is not the substance of God. It is what you have separated yourself from God with. So that's what the ego is. And there's nothing wrong with the ego. We need it to get through the physical form. It's the ego that allows you to step out of the way of a speeding Chevy when you're on the road. So, but it is limited in what it does. The soul has no limits. The soul can be zillions of miles long. The soul, we think that we have a soul inside of our body, but we don't. Our body is inside of our souls. So, our souls are much greater, and there's no limit to where they are. We can't even measure how big our souls are. All we're doing is just experiencing things. As human beings, we only do one thing, and that is we create experience. And the soul is what orchestrates all that experience. It takes all the information that we gather within this body while we're in it, basically, but it is omnipotent and omnipresent, and it knows everything. So what it does is it's been here a billion times over or a million times over on this planet, and it's had different lifetimes and all kinds of stuff like that. So it knows what's right and wrong for you in this body as you are, and it tries to direct you into the expansion of experience so that you can learn more. So that's what expands the universe as you learn more. You are here for two reasons. One is joy, because we are hardwired to love ourselves. We are hardwired to be joy. We deny that, and when we find out that we deny that, that's when we get ego. I don't trust my experience. That's ego. And we are also hardwired to expand. And how do we expand? We expand by elevating our emotions and our experience, by learning more about what is this life process that we are going through, by learning more about other people, by learning more information, by learning about different kinds of things that you wouldn't normally have access to, like being out of body, or like being cultures that existed before we were born and stuff like that. As we learn these things, we expand ourselves in much greater depth and in much greater height. And that simultaneously expands the universe, because we are, God is experiencing himself through us. And that's how it works. So, and God only wants to expand so it can be better for everybody else.
Right.
God never, and what you have to understand is that there's no such thing as external assertion. God doesn't interfere in anything you do. That's your ego is what makes the choices, and then God helps you experience that. Make sense?
Definitely does. Michael, do you have anything? Any more questions?
I have something.
Or yeah, of
Michael.
course.
It's a question about the different light bodies, if you don't have anything.
Please.
I was curious the tie between, so we have these different energetic bodies, right? So I'm curious about surgeries, because I'm also thinking with the Satori, it sounded like there were a lot of people who had this experience when they peaked at a physical level. There's like that tie. They went beyond their peak physical experience and they reached the Satori.
Mhm.
So I'm curious with things like surgeries or injuries that happen to our physical, our vessel, how that affects spiritual growth, or what that means for our energetic bodies, and what one can do if they have an injury or a surgery, how it ties together, and like what one can do to aid the progression of their spirituality, even with issues with the, in the physical.
Well, understand that, this is a yes universe and it says yes to everything. So if you want, if you want to choose bondage, it'll say yes to that. Whatever you choose, it says yes to. If you want to choose unconditional love, it says yes to. Before we enter a physical body, we have a discussion with our guides and our angels about what we're going to experience in this lifetime, the highlights of what we're going to experience, the dark and the light. So what happens is the highlights are outlined for us before we enter this body. And as we understand that, basically, we understand that everything happens for us, not to us. So surgery is something we need to go through in order to learn something new about ourselves at different times. And the energetic portions of us have different experiences in that process. Now, I had a quadruple bypass. Now, I'm a spiritual person and I'm very, very liberated in my ability to deal with things. So what happened to me was basically when I was on the table, my soul left my body, as it doesn't always reside in my body anyway, because my body resides inside of my soul, but my soul left the animation of my body while I was on the table, and they were replacing my heart. They actually took my heart out of my body and they put it in a resuscitator for a while. When that happened, my soul rose from my body and I could see what was going on inside the room. I could see it anyway, even though I was out physically and aesthetically. The anesthesia put me out, but my soul was awake. And I could see what was going on inside the room. And I started to move toward the tunnel of, this death experience, if you will, or re-emergence into the non-physical field. And what happens was I was met by a number of different, beings that I recognize as vibrations, like an old uncle of mine, the first time I ever experienced love. He was the first person that ever gave me love in this physical body. My parents, I didn't recognize love from them when I was young because they were in fear. But my uncle took one look at me the first time I met him when I was about 5 years old, and he had this amazing love in his eyes and in his body, and I experienced that. So he was there to meet me when I left my body at that particular point, as well as about 5 other different beings. And they said to me, you have a choice. You can come into the non-physical and stay with us if you'd like, or you can go back. Your choice, 100%. And I said, well, I'm in love with this woman, which Michael knows, which is Marbeth. And I said, I have a mission to help her. She needs, I won't tell you what she needs. She has, I have a mission to help her. We are soulmates, compadres, and I want to stay on this planet for her and with her. And they just sent me back. And that's all there was.
Oh, that's
Awesome.
amazing.
Yeah, when you see them these two together, it's like,
And
Yeah,
then, oh, that's so beautiful.
yeah.
And with that surgery, I guess I'm curious if you want to share with us and our viewers, was there something like a practice you may have done to aid with like your energetic bodies, or you just did your physical healing and you kept up with your
did my physical healing. Just did my physical healing. Two things were really important when I had my surgery, my heart surgery. One is when the doctor came in and he told me that, my arteries were blocked and that he had to do a quadruple surgery. And I looked into his eyes and our souls met. And I looked into his eyes and I said, I know this guy is so present that he would never hurt me. He couldn't even make a mistake. He was so present. So I said, I could put my life in your hands, and I immediately said, yes, you can do me tomorrow if that's what you want. But I also knew that I had to go through this for a particular person, for a particular reason that was regarding Marbeth, was regarding my loved one, my beloved. And so I had to go through that to learn a particular kind of submissive, I don't know what you would call it, just submissive connection with her in a different way. And that was the purpose of my surgery. Not because I was sick, even though, I had this little heart attack, but the heart attack was for the reason of, I overheated and I didn't pay attention to my body in a way that I should, so I ate badly. Um, I was very much more into taste than I was into nutrition. And I hurt myself by doing that, but I was just exploring and enjoying, the sensations, the senses of my taste and smell and touch and stuff. And so I got a little bit addicted to that, and it had difficulties for me. So
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
vibe with that.
Yeah, likewise. We were just talking about this
Yeah.
before calling you, so that's nice that it came up.
Oh,
Living
okay.
this
Nice.
sense
What were you guys talking about?
Oh, but thanks for the reminder that if I keep going the way I'm going, I'll do for a heart attack.
just our childhoods. We grew up eating a lot of junk food or very overweight and having certain emotional connections to that and how like there's a programming that we have to actively meet even in adulthood because that kind of like that hypnosis of that sticks. But
Oh yeah, we were talking about like, how when we were kids, for me particularly, people always called me a little fat kid when I was growing up, and I just, we were talking about how it's like been an identity that you kind of taken on or you self-chosen, to also continue to identify with that long after, the stimulus has gone. So like, when you awaken to these aspects, you realize, oh, I have taken on the identity of that fat kid. But then now you're aware of it, you can release it.
the
Because you're aware of
stories.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the awareness that gives you the ability to release it, right? Yeah. So yeah. So I have a sweet tooth, and I still have a sweet tooth.
Thank you for Michael's weight loss journey. Like, subscribe,
I do as well.
follow for more.
Well started.
No, the sweet tooth, Harrison. I was gonna say this connection with eating and emotions.
But what is that? What is that? Spiritually, what does
Yeah,
it
the
mean when
sweet
you're
tooth.
craving sugar?
They say it's when you
Is
want.
there a deeper meaning to that?
Yeah.
They say it's when you want
she's
to
on a
give.
period. Oh, what?
No.
No?
They say it's. I mean,
Maybe not
that's
that,
valid,
but-
but they
Means
say
you're not, it means you're not processing the emotions in the way that is healthy for you. So everything starts with a thought, which then turns into emotion, which then turns into a physical craving. So, I had a much bigger physical craving and craving for sugar and stuff like that. And I still do. I mean, I have chocolate at the end of every meal. So
Hey,
I like that too. I like a little
Oh, yeah. Just little pieces of chocolate, but before I had big pieces of chocolate.
I
So,
mean, that's the thing too. Not going so
Inside the
extreme.
regular size.
Because I used to be so disciplined and I would not have any sweets at all, but then, it was imbalanced
Right.
because then I
Yeah.
would crave so badly, So
well,
little,
I would rationalize it to myself, and I say, "Hey, what's life without enjoying your
Enjoy
guilty
yourself.
pleasures?"
Have experiences. Let's eat more chocolate.
it's true.
So, it's just to get us on a talking point. A word,
Are you pivoting?
yes.
Pivot, holy pivot.
Pivot. Okay.
Yeah,
Let me
please
turn
go
around.
ahead.
Should I make a circle?
Well, there's a word that I feel like has been overly popularized today, and everyone kind of identifies with it on a certain level. Trauma,
Mhm.
everyone kind of blames
Yeah.
their current circumstances on their past traumas.
Mm.
And for our viewers out there who have suffered a traumatic event, which I'm sure we all have on certain levels and to certain degrees,
All right.
some more than others, some more extreme, some more valid, or everyone's valid, blah blah blah. Like, subscribe, follow for more content.
What was that? Life was what?
Like, subscribe, and follow for more content.
Oh, yeah.
He's being the YouTube person right now.
But
High five.
hey, all right, hit that like button.
Hit that like button.
Yeah, let's-
Don't you hesitate one moment.
So trauma, what would you, what information would you give to, let's say, someone on the audience or even one of ourselves who sort of blamed their trauma on their present circumstances and are having trouble, sort of letting go, or just what's your take on all of
Like,
that?
how do you let go?
Yeah.
And-
Or how do you move on, or how do you use it?
Well, trauma is a matter of conditioning. So you have repeated to yourself enough times a particular way that you feel. And thoughts come before feelings, not after feelings. Most people believe that feelings come and then you have thoughts about that, or you have thoughts about your circumstances. No, your thoughts come first, and then your emotions come from your thoughts. Trauma is about something that you have either heard or repeated so many times to yourself that you become overly sensitive to the effect of it on you. So that's the first part, and it's dramatic. So you're conditioned into by your own self or by, the people that are around you, your environment in some way, but your environment is really you anyway. But you're conditioned into a place where you have conclusions that you've made that has been kind of reinforcing the fact that you are not enough, that you're not worthy, that you're not strong, that you're not dynamic, that you don't have this stuff to be what you want to be. That's what trauma is about. And so you re you retreat into a place where you constrict yourself. And in the constriction, basically, your body and your muscles start to constrict, and things have to flow. Like water has to flow through a garden hose. If you're stepping on the garden hose, it doesn't get all the way through. So, what happens is trauma is a point of where you've made a conclusion where you don't want to experience something. And so when you don't want to experience something, you step on the garden hose and energy and life can't flow through you. So you start to withdraw, you retreat into this place of, maybe, some psychologists would call it a man cave or a woman cave or whatever the case may be. You go backwards instead of go forwards because you are motivated by fear. Because some place in your background, you have concluded that will hurt you. There's something harmful to you in that environment. Whatever triggers that trauma is harmful to you in some way. So to overcome trauma, what we have to do is we have to reframe how it affects us. So we have to show in small steps that it doesn't really have the effect that we think it's going to have. The basis of all fear is I can't handle this. Trauma is fear. So when you come to the point of where I can handle this, you start to overcome your fear. And you understand that fear is just something that is a conditioned response. It is nothing that is real. Psychological, there are some fears that are real. You're standing on the edge of a cliff and you're tottering. That's a tiger is chasing you. That's a real fear. You're in a pit of snakes. That's a real fear. But psychological fears are not real. They are imaginative events that you believe will harm you. Okay, so when you understand that that's something that you made up, you've created it, you can decreate it. If you've made it up, you can decreate it. You have some experience, so just decreate it by going the opposite direction. I have dozens of techniques that will end fear. In fact, this coming Tuesday night when I have my class, we're going to talk about ending fear. That's a big part
I
of
will
this.
be there for that.
Oh,
one.
you
I
teach
missed
class?
last Tuesday.
Yeah, I teach classes. I have a lot of fun with it. Michael can tell you. I mean,
Yeah.
I teach pretty profound stuff, but I laugh all the way through it.
Oh,
And he does not stop laughing the entire way.
do you teach online? I guess from the
Yeah.
as well. So it's
Yeah.
you guys take an online course?
Check
Or
it
I
out.
haven't joined yet, but this Tuesday I'm planning on
Yeah.
it's
joining
online.
one of the
It's
courses.
online.
Well,
I had a different
Harrison,
lecture I had
also
to
you
commit
should
to
take
last
this
Tuesday.
opportunity.
That's right.
You should take this opportunity to tell our viewers how they can contact you and how they can meet with you, or if there's a website, please let us know.
Sure. If you, if you're going through any kind of trauma, if you're going through any kind of psychological pain, if you are not getting what you want financially, if you're not getting what you want in relationships, if you're not healthy, all those things are things that are basically spiritual experiences, and they are, or you can call them psychological experiences, whatever you want. And I teach you how to bust those limiting beliefs. I teach you how to stop self-sabotaging yourself. I teach you how to, create from a place of joy as opposed to, place of withdrawal or restriction. There's only two motivators in the world, real motivators, which is love and fear. Fear is the absence of love, and love creates. So love and fear are attractors. So in my classes, basically, we heal people, we heal situations. It's a completely safe physical environment online, or sometimes I teach in person, or I do whatever, but it's a completely safe and vulnerable experience. You can say anything. You have a bunch of people who are there to support you, that love you, that are there for the same purpose you are. And so if you want to connect with me to come into one of my classes, you can do that at connecting with me at Calendly. You can make an appointment to speak to me at calendly.com, and then I can put it in the chat, /Harrison, Harrison, then underscore Klein, Klein. So you can make an appointment with me with that. If you want to connect with me by email, you can do ProAbundance, ProAbundance. So like it's professional abundance, or Paul Robert Oscar Abundance, ProAbundance@gmail.com. If you want to, experience one of my products, you can go to go.imharrisonklein.com. So Harrison Klein, I just spelled it out for you. You can put it in the chat here if you want. So
We'll link it when we publish it. We'll put it in the show notes. Your
Yeah.
Calendly, your website,
Everything.
everything.
Yeah, and I'm I like to make instantaneous shifts for people. So it's all about prosperity consciousness. It's all about love consciousness. It's all about success consciousness, and the absence of those things are what keep you from experiencing them. So if you have the proper consciousness roadmap to how that works, which is what I provide. I provide the consciousness roadmaps to those things, and the scale of consciousness, so you'll always know where you're at. So when I provide the scale of that, from that particular place, you experience where you're at, you can see where you're at, and then you can see where the next step is, so that you know, you're not searching for something that is in a void. You're searching for something specific. When you do that, now you create a goal. That goal then has a power to either pull you or reject you, and you want to create that and build it in a way that pulls you along, so it's effortless rather than pushes you along where you have to have effort. And what love liberates, and it pulls you to where you want to go. Fear binds, and it restricts you from where you want to go. So there are many forms of fear, there are many forms of love, but they all boil down to what is the core of all that stuff. And I teach you how to get to the core of all those things. So that's what I do. And I've been put on this earth for that mission, and it's what I've been doing successfully for a lot of years now, probably almost 4 decades. So pretty
Wow.
cool.
Thank
Fantastic.
you. Thank you for that work, the
You're
divine
welcome.
work you do.
Yeah, that's good.
But we definitely have to have you on again, because I feel like, and honestly, Harrison's the kind of guy you can really pose any question, any topic
Yes.
on, and he will just take it layer by layer and just peel it back until the very fundamental cores of it. I'm afraid of this, okay, and then he'll just bring it back down to your what is an illusion,
Mm.
Right.
and So I want to thank you. We want to thank you for having for taking the time and being on our podcast, and we definitely have to have you on again for more discussions of evolution of the evolution of spirituality between thousands of years ago to modern day, and how spirituality and interacting with the modern world that we live in today, because it's been unlike anything we've experienced in human history before, which is the level of connection and stimulation that we have to sort of navigate our way through. So
You aren't seeing the last of us.
I hope not. You guys are delightful and fun, and you're putting me in a position of being the guru, but basically I like to converse. So, and I get as much from you guys as you get from me, whatever that happens to be. The teacher learns from the student, the parent learns from the child, the doctor learns from the patient. So as you guys ask me questions, that brings out good stuff in me. As we converse, that brings out good stuff in both of us. So the greater we have in this conversation, the greater becomes our collective growth. And life is good. Life is good. I'm a happy guy. I've been happy for, I don't know, almost 5 decades, maybe at least 4.5 anyway. And I have hardly experienced a handful of bad days. A handful, not even 5. So, all that stuff is just a matter of happiness is how we are naturally wired. Love is how we are naturally wired. And, that's our natural state of being. We deviate from that by, being convinced that we aren't that by somebody convincing us, or we convincing ourselves that we aren't, or that we lack. We don't lack anything spiritually. There we are completely whole in every way. And if you start from that premise, basically you expand that premise, and then nothing is rejected from you, or to you. You get along with people. Your health is good. You achieve what you want to achieve. You live in a way that is a steady state of well-being. And in a steady state of well-being, there are no problems. The higher the consciousness, the fewer the problems, because everything is in the here and now. And when you're in the here and now, nothing is beyond your reach.
oof, oof.
Oof.
Mic drop.
Woof.
That was a mic drop moment right there. When you're here in the here and now,
All right,
nothing
let's
is
not,
out of
don't
your-
push it.
Yeah, it's terrible. That should be a
Said it
t-shirt.
so eloquently.
I know.
I don't
I'm
want
just
to. I
saying,
don't want to.
it should
It's
totally
like
be
it's
a
still
t-shirt.
ringing, and I don't want the ring to stop.
It's still
We
reverberating
can
through
immortalize,
the
you can immortalize it in a banner.
I think for an episode we're gonna draw on Michael's head.
We can write, do tattoos on his head and mine.
There we go.
Yeah. I also want, you just mentioned something, you said something about that it's still ringing. Another thing I want you to guys, here's a little tip for you guys to know. Have you ever experienced high-pitched ringing in your ear?
Yes.
That is prelude to a change. So when you experience a high-pitched ringing
That's
in
a
your
lot.
ear,
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
year.
you're in the midst, you're starting to create a new change, a new sense of consciousness. So be cognizant of that, because it is a um,
Hotels.
congruent. It is congruent with your desires. So when you're experiencing a high pitched frequency that rings inside of your ears, that's a prelude to a change. You're in the midst of a prelude. You've already started the momentum of that.
that's
Very
amazing.
cool thing to know.
Very cool.
Thank you for that one. Now we'll know.
You are
Fantastic.
welcome.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
The
Thank you
other
for
side,
being
no?
here.
Thank
my
you.
pleasure. My great pleasure.
Yeah.
I enjoyed you guys immensely.
Great.
Thank
And, I hope we get a chance to, go a lot further. As I told you off camera, you guys are welcome to come into my class as well. So, So we will see you hopefully on Tuesday night. And for those of you who are listening, I would love to meet you, and we can share a virtual or a personal hug. And in that process, we can find out who we are and where we want to go, and live the life of a champion, because we are all champions internally. The magnificence of who we are is beyond anything we can even imagine. So, play. The
Play.
whole thing is about playfulness.
Like, what can you do?
The more you're able to play, the less problems you have.
If only our parents
Play.
told us that when we were kids, right?
Play. Play.
My parents used to tell me, you think life is about play?" And I
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, I do."
You want to be joyous? How dare you be
You go to
joyous?
work,
Life is about being happy.
work.
That's
I have
and,
kids,
and,
make
I-
miserable
and I
work.
and I would say yes, but they didn't. They did their best to convince me it's not. But guess what? Who was right? They died miserable. I'm happy.
Go kicking.
Yeah. So all that kind of stuff. So I teach people how to stay in that happiness space.
Ah, okay, very exciting. I look
Okay.
forward to working with you. I know both of you are already working with Harrison, so this is great. It's wonderful to meet you. And thank
Pleasure
you
to meet
for being on
you.
the show.
Stay tuned, follow us for more. We will be with you guys next week with another wonderful guest to be determined. And
Surprise.
Surprise. It's always a surprise here.
So here's a fist bump and a high five and an elbow.
Hello.
We will see you at some further episode. Thanks
Yeah.
for.
Yes,
Is
sure.
there anything you guys want to do or say before we go?
Oh, I think.
No, just thank you. Thanks so much. This is always great. It's
Yes,
always a
thank
very
you.
relaxing, calm energy after we have any discussions with you, podcast or not. So it's very nice.
Pleasure. Okay.
Gloria.
So
See you
excited.
guys at the next opportunity.
Bye bye.
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 Till next week, guys.